All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Christopher J. Harris, and I am so honored and so excited that you've tuned in to today's episode. Every single week, we are working and striving to provide tools for inspiration and wisdom for life. We inspire everyday people to live wise lives. And in fact, we want to provide strategies for hearts to be inspired and heads to be wise. Guess what, y'all? We're on a roll. This has been absolutely amazing. I am so excited of what is taking place with this podcast. We are still kind of in the baby stage, and I'm gonna ride this honeymoon out as long as I can. The truth is that every single week we get better. Our recordings get better, our sound gets better, our production gets better. We are learning as we go, and I'm sure just like you, there have been things that if we waited until it was perfect, we would have never started it. And so thank you so much for being a part of my podcast family and for the feedback and the reviews. Speaking of reviews, I want to invite all of you, please go to iTunes and leave a review. I want to be listed in the new and noteworthy section for podcasts, and you can help me with that. I want to thank you so much for taking the time each week as we are focused on life and leadership and family and marriage, and of course, ministry, the church. That's the focus of our podcast. John Maynard Keynes said this: ideas shape the course of history. And of course, I believe that wise ideas positively change the course of lives. And so make no mistake about it, we say it all the time, when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your whole life gets better in every area. And so if you're new to us, we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursday morning. And a lot of you may listen to this podcast with friends and in groups. And we'd love to hear about those listening parties and groups that are happening around the world. So please send us a message at info, I-N-F-O, at thewiseideapodcast.com. Wiseideapodcast.com. If you're not already subscribed, this is your personal invitation to subscribe so that you can get this podcast and information right in your inbox. Well, guess what, guys? I've got another amazing person, another exciting guest that is on with me today. And this last few weeks have been absolutely amazing. And I'm so excited to have my friend, my sister, Civilla Morgan, on with us. Civilla, how are you today?
I'm awesome, Pastor Christopher. How are you doing today?
You know what? I'm amazing, and I'm so excited to have you on. But before we jump into the interview, to the conversation, I have to tell my listeners a little backstory about you and I and how we got connected. Do you mind if I do that? Will that embarrass you?
Not at all.
So, guys, if you're listening to this podcast, a huge reason why this podcast is on the air and is available around the world is because of Civilla Morgan. Literally, I had the desire, the vision to do a podcast and was not sure exactly which direction to go, how to make it happen, and all of that, and shared it with a member of our church. And this member in the lobby of our church said to me one afternoon, "Oh, really? I didn't know you wanted to do a podcast. My sister does a podcast." And I said, "Really? Tell me about it." And that brief conversation turned into a 45-minute discussion. And we ended up pulling my laptop up and looking at this podcast of this person, his sister, and talked about how she got started and all of that. Long story short, that sister was Civilla Morgan. And I said, "Man, I've got to get in touch with your sister." And, you know, for those of you that are in ministry or understand the rhythm of preachers, you know that oftentimes on Sunday nights, we're not in the business of trying to talk to too many people or do too much work after a busy Sunday. And long story short, I was able to connect with Miss Morgan on a Sunday afternoon, and I think we talked 2 hours. Like it was just an amazing conversation. She got me connected to the folks that have helped to produce her podcast, who is now my producer. Shout out to my man, Kevin.
All right, shout out.
Incredible job at making all of us sound good and appear good. And so, long story short, Sa-Vil-La, you have played a huge role in offering the wise idea to the world. So can I be one of the first to say thank you?
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Thank you so very much for that.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and jump into the deep end of the pool here today.
Okay.
Uh, your podcast is called Childless Not By Choice.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Well, we got to know why. Tell me how you arrived at that title and arrived at launching a podcast around this idea.
Well, Kevin's name is going to come up again because the original name of the podcast was 21st Century Hannah. And for those of you who are Christians, you know who Hannah was in the Old Testament and you know her story. And although our stories diverge, we both started out as childless, not by choice women. She ended up having the children. She had 5, in fact. The most famous of those was Samuel, the prophet. I ended up not having any, and that's where our stories diverge. But Kevin, who has been my podcast producer for the last 3 years, has been instrumental in growing my platform. And he told me from almost the beginning that I needed to change the name, but he didn't beat me up over it. He waited until I got to the point where I realized I need to change the name because not everybody, as he said, knows who Hannah is or was. And so I eventually changed the name to Childless Not By Choice. So even if you go back into my back catalog, if you go far back enough, you will find me calling some of my episodes 21st Century Hannah. And I still use that term in some of my platform. But the podcast is Childless Not By Choice. And I started the podcast about 6 months after I started my platform. And I started my platform because I ended up having to have a hysterectomy in 2011, never having had the child that I wanted with all my heart. And I didn't see any resources online or in person. There was no one to help me. Nobody got it. Nobody understood the pain. I even got some, why don't you just deal with it, get over it types of response. I don't understand what the problem is types of responses. And so in 2014, November 2014, I quit my day job and decided to start my own platform.
Wow. So, man, there's so much to unpack in all of that. I think I want to start with this notion of how to respond when the deepest desire or one of the deepest desires of your life just doesn't happen. What does that look like? How did you process that?
Honestly, I still have my moments, although I'm maintaining a platform where there are more than, I don't know, 300 women on the Facebook group, and they're all looking to me to help them in their deepest pain. I feel like I still, at times, I'm still processing the pain, although there's a distance there now. There's a time distance. I don't think the emptiness in your heart ever really completely goes away. In fact, one of the graphics I have that I use a lot is a heart-shaped puzzle where there's a piece missing from the puzzle. And it's the piece that's missing is it's 3-dimensional, so the piece that's missing looks a little bit further away from the rest of the puzzle, if that description helps or makes sense. But so I always tell the women this, there will always be a missing piece in the heart that's not going to completely close. And the thing that we have to do with that is make a choice. And the word choice is used quite a bit on the platform. We're going to have to choose to be joyful anyway, and to have a joyful and relevant life, which is something I say in every opening to every podcast episode. So it's a choice. I have to choose to make the decision that although I did not get what I wanted out of life, that life is short. I'm going to have to find where the joy is and do the best I can with what I do have.
So you talk about this image, this emptiness. Do you feel like how do you navigate this notion that God has another plan? And what does that look like practically for a person to say, okay, God, I wanted X, Y, Z, but you obviously wanted me to have elemental P.
Yes. Well, as I said, it's still a struggle at times, and I'll be honest, there are different struggles that we talk about in our Facebook group. Some women are still struggling at where seeing a pregnant woman makes them fall apart and just, just become a puddle of tears. And that was me at one point. Now where I am, I don't like going to church on Mother's Day, for instance. That's my big thing. Because, and maybe, honestly, maybe it's a little bit of pride, but at least in the beginning, it was shame, because as childless not by choice women, many of us feel shame. We feel self-shame, and we feel society shame, because we're not able to do the most basic thing that women are supposed to be able to do. That's what society tells us. We're supposed to be able to at least have a kid. And when we can't even do that, then we feel shame. The ones who are married, because I'm not married either, the ones that are married tell me that they feel guilt because they wanted to produce a child for their husband. And a lot of them say that their husbands tell them it's fine. And I always tell women, although I don't have a husband, I think I know enough about men to know that if they say everything is fine, believe them. Men only say what they really mean. We, on the other hand, can, go back and forth, but men typically say what they mean. And so I'm telling them, look, if he said everything's fine, go with it. And of course, there are marriages that struggle because some husbands wanted children. And so I know of marriages that have broken up over this. And so I just tell them to, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but, I go back to joy and relevance. There's a reason for us to be on this planet, whether we had the children or not, whether we got what we wanted or not. There are tons of people whose lives didn't work out the way they expected or wanted, not just the childless not by choice woman. It just so happens that that's my story. Being childless not by choice is what happened to me. Not having children is what didn't happen. And so, again, what do I do with it? What do I do with the pain? In my case, I created this platform. And even when I want to put it down and walk away, maybe because I feel like I don't have enough listeners or people participating, they're in the group, but they're not participating, then that's just a given on any platform. But when you're putting your heart and soul into something, it hurts a little bit, but you have to keep going, because in my case, I feel like it's a calling. I feel called. If I can walk away from a day job, it's a calling, because I'm all about making my money. And so it was a 1-year calling before I finally responded and said, okay, let me go do this. So bottom line, we have to make the decision. We have to make the choice. And whatever that is, whatever that looks like for each individual childless not by choice woman, we've got to grasp onto that and see what we can do with it, what life we can make with it.
All right, guys, we'll be right back. I know you are right in the middle of an incredible conversation, and you were gleaning things from this incredible conversation that we're having currently. We'll get right back to it. I was enjoying myself as well, but I wanted to interject really quickly and just invite you, if you are listening to this podcast, that probably means that you are also on social media. Well, listen, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. As a matter of fact, y'all, guess what? I'm also on Pinterest. I would love to have you as a part of my tribe, my following, my connection, my social media family. And so if you're on any of those platforms, I'm at CJ Harris, O-N-E. CJ Harris, O-N-E. Would love to connect with you. So while this commercial is even going on, before we get back into the conversation, why don't you go online right now, pull your devices out, pull your computer out, and hit the follow button, hit the friend request button, hit the engage button, and we'd be so glad to have you as a part of our social media following and family. Not only that, as you listen to this podcast, you may be hearing things that are insightful for you, things that are being shared where the light bulb goes off. I would love to hear about those moments. As a matter of fact, you may be listening and there may be questions that you have or things you'd like to share with us that you're hearing. And either way, we'd love to hear from you. So please send us an email. The email address is info, I-N-F-O, at ChristopherJHarris.com. Again, that's info@ChristopherJHarris.com. Not only that, but lastly, if you have a project or a book or a platform that you'd like to promote or advertise with us, you're thinking that this would be a great audience for you to reach and connect with, we'd love to start a conversation with you about that. So please send us an email, again, at info@ChristopherJHarris.com. And in turn, we'll send you an information sheet and be glad to start that incredible conversation of partnership with you. With that said, guys, let's get right back into this amazing conversation that we're having. Be sure to pull your notes back out. It's going to be fun. Let's go. Wow. So earlier you talked a little bit about this notion of shame and, alluded to obviously there being kind of two components of it. The one being the self-shame, the other one being shame received from society. I want to talk about that notion of the shame from society for a moment. What are some things, for those that are listening to this, and even for me, what are things, folks that are in this community or this tribe, if you would, that are childless not by choice? What are some everyday things that most people or many people would take for granted that really become zingers and open the wounds back up again that we just wouldn't pay attention to? You mentioned Mother's Day. What are some other examples of that cause shame or that cause embarrassment that we should be aware of?
Well, let me open that answer by saying that building and creating kind but firm boundaries is a course that I offer on my platform. And I offer that course because still in 2018, people tend to think that your fertility is their business. And so people still ask, do you have children? Well, that's a valid question. But if my answer is no, some will understand and just leave it alone. And some will say, really? Why not? That is the wrong answer, or that is the wrong response. The right response is, oh, okay. And then if you really care to know and she seems like she's willing to talk, then you can continue the conversation. If it seems like she wants it to stay at no, I do not, then leave it there. But people say the weirdest things. I mean, one woman posted in the group recently that she was told, and here we go with church. I know. Keep in mind, dear listener, I'm a PK. I was raised in church. I'm a preacher's kid. So I'm not speaking against the church, but I believe that church has a long way to go when it comes to realizing and recognizing that the people that show up for church are not all husband and wife and kids. There are different dynamics. There are people in the church who are single. They've been single for a very long time. There are divorced people. There are widowed people. There are women who wanted but could not have children. There are all types of dynamics that make up a church congregation. And that's just how it is. But church has just not caught up to that idea. So one woman posted in the group that she was told that she should go help take care of the kids in children's church to give the mothers a break.
Did she say anything to the person that said this to her, or like what?
She is new to the group, and I don't remember what her response was, but if she had been in the group long enough, I could basically tell you what it would be, because this is what I tell them all the time. Create kind but firm boundaries, but make sure that people understand what they can and cannot say to you, and tell them what is and is not acceptable. And it's tough, but I will tell you that one of my admins, for instance, who's having a tough time right now with her childlessness, but she was in a group setting the other day, a jewelry party. You know how we women like to have our little parties. She was in a jewelry party, and these women know she doesn't have kids, and some of them know how much she wants kids, and they started talking about their kids. Well, that's what women do when they get together. But then it almost seemed to her, I guess, like it was becoming a little annoying on purpose. So she excused herself early from the party. She bought some jewelry and then she left. That is creating kind but firm boundaries. because I tell them all the time, you do not have to stay. If you are in a situation where you begin to feel uncomfortable or are made to feel uncomfortable, leave. I do not believe in selfishness, but this is the one time that I will say be selfish, because you are trying to protect your heart and your mind. Yes, and your mind.
So let me ask this: how much of this conversation do you believe um, is where folks are just ignorant and not aware, um, versus folks who um,
A
just
petty?
are petty? Yeah, yeah. I was trying to be nice with that. Yeah, that's a great way to say that.
I think that 98% of the time, people are just not aware. So I am not trying to say that, oh, all these people are against us, it's us against them. No, it's not that. I think there's a high level of just, is that a word, unawareness? I make up words from time to
It
time.
will be a word for our podcast.
Okay. Okay, so that's that. I think 98% of the times people they just don't get it. They the women that they're used to interacting with who don't have children pretend to be okay with it, or they're somebody's auntie, or they just try to blend in with society. And I've created a platform where I'm drawing us out and creating conversation and awareness on a global level. So now we are in the spotlight. And so there's going to be that 2% that are going to say, well, why don't you just get over it? What's wrong with you? And I've gotten that. I've gotten it at work, where people would come in with their babies and make little comments like, guess she can't have any. Or when the company that I worked for was a specialty pharmacy. I sat right next to the fertility team, of all places to sit next to. And the women over there would complain about all the money these women were dropping for the next IVF cycle. She's 40 years old. Why doesn't she just forget about it? Dropping 10 grand just like that for another IVF cycle, because insurance covered next to nothing. And so a lot of it is women that I don't understand the dynamic of how you can be a mom and not understand how painful it would be not to be a mom. But that's something I'm still researching. So yeah, I think it's a small percentage that are petty.
So educate us. What's an IVF cycle, just so that everybody that's listening to this will know what that is.
Um, in vitro fertilization, where women pay pay money to get pregnant by buying different types of medications and using those medications at different times of the month, depending on when they're ovulating, so that they have a higher chance of getting pregnant. In a nutshell, that's what it is.
Got it. Got it. No, that totally makes sense. So, how much mental health is involved with all of this? At what point does a person need to go to see a counselor? Is this something that you just pray away? What's the condition there? What's that look like?
Well, prayer is wonderful, and especially if you are a Christian, the word says to pray continually, and so that's what you do. You pray, but I think that God is a God of common sense, and that He created us with enough knowledge to have people who have gone to school to become mental health counselors, to become psychiatrists and psychologists, just like He created people who could do heart surgery. And so we need to exercise common sense, especially again in the church, and pray and work, because the word also says that prayer without works, or faith without works, is no good. I believe in praying and working. And so, especially, I'll speak for myself. When I had my hysterectomy in 2011, I was fine for a little while, and then the depression set in and the sadness set in, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I decided to go see a psychologist. And I saw the psychologist for couple of months, 2-3 months or so, until I felt better. And I strongly suggest that people do that. no matter what trauma, because being childless not by choice is a trauma. No matter what trauma you've been through, see a psychologist or psychiatrist or whichever one you're supposed to see immediately, because that's what helped me. This particular psychologist gave me, he gave me my light bulb moment, because I don't think I realized before then, but even when I was crying in his office, he would say, "What are you crying for?" And I would say, I'm crying. I can't stop crying. This is why I came to you, because I found myself crying day in and day out. I would cry on my way to work, cry on my way home. I'd cry in the shower, cry myself to sleep. I would wake up crying. There is nothing worse than waking up crying. When you wake up crying, you've got a problem. And so he said, "You're grieving." And that's when the light bulb went off. Those of us who are childless not by choice are grieving the loss of the opportunity to have a child. And that's what I'm trying to get across in my platform, that we're grieving. And then what do you do with grief? Because if you keep it and you hold on to it, you're not going to live the life that you were meant to live. So then I talk to them about how to let it go in their time. Not let it go the way the world says to let it go, but let it go in their time by talking, commiserating, guest blogging, whatever it is, everything that we do on our platform.
Wow. So, the interesting thing about this too, I think, is, and I want to back up to this, you said this earlier. I don't want to skip over it or make light of it. You talked about being a PK. For people that may not know what that is, it's a short term, affectionately known PK as a preacher's kid. So, one of your parents or both of your parents are pastors and in ministry. And, there are lots of anecdotal and sometimes cultural euphemisms that go along with that notion of being a PK in terms of behavior or ideas. Unfortunately, many people think that PKs get the short end of the deal and turn away from the faith. But that's not the reality, I think, for many. So to hear your story in terms of the hysterectomy in 2011, obviously you were an adult by then, but how has this reoriented your faith? What do you do now, or how have you approached life differently from a faith standpoint as a result of all of this?
Well, I think even more so now, I believe that my faith means that I'm in relationship with Jesus. This is not religion for me. I don't even like when people say, "Oh, she's religious," or "he's religious." What does that mean? Because I believe that it's got to be a relationship where you rely on your relationship and you rely on Jesus, because what else are you going to do? I mean, I had a crossroads moment in my life, not even way before all of this, way before the hysterectomy, before the platform. I came to a crossroads moment where I had to make the decision on my own that I was either going to go left and do things the way the world did. And honestly, if I had done that, I probably would have had a child by now. But who else knows, who knows what else would have come with that. And then I could choose to go right and go with Jesus. And in doing so, I ended up not having the child or the husband. And so it's a decision. It's a decision I made. I don't regret the decision. But, being a PK, we do get the short end because people judge us. They think that just because they know a handful of stories where preachers' kids have turned away and gone wild, left and went out into the world, well, they probably did it because of the church folk. So, I don't like the notion that preachers' kids are wild and crazy. I don't like it at all, because if you've met any wild and crazy preachers' kids, it was because of the church folk. Let me be blunt. But again, I made the decision to go the way of Jesus, and honestly, I wonder sometimes what would have happened. I've wondered, should say, what would have happened if I had just gone my own way. And those are just thoughts that will pop up in your head, and there's nothing you can do about it. I feel like I did the right thing, And I'm going to stick with that. I'll stick with my relationship with Jesus. Has he answered my prayers? All of my prayers? No. No. The two things I wanted the most out of life were a husband and a kid. That's all I wanted. And I didn't think that was too much to ask, because many other people are doing the same thing. It's pretty normal. So when he answers no to both of those things, then yes, he does have something else in mind. And do I look like a weirdo? Maybe. Maybe society sees me as a weirdo, or, what's wrong with her? Maybe she's got a personality issue. I don't think I have a personality issue. I don't have a different personality issue to the average woman out there, but this is where he wants me. So I've got to go with it, because if I go in the opposite direction, it's not going to work out. That much I can say for sure.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A direct testimony, a transparent testimony, honest, raw, and real from Miss Sa-Vi-La Morgan. This is part one of this interview, Childless Not By Choice. Wow. We never have enough time to solve every problem and to deal with every issue on the podcast. I guess I just have to resolve that the goal of the Wise Idea is simply to bring it to the forefront, to simply create the conversation, the platform for the conversation. And I would hope that as you listen to these episodes, that you would go in your own time and reflect and think about some of the things that you're hearing. And particularly as you engage in conversation with some of your closest family and friends, maybe you would also raise the conversation with them. The whole idea here is to share wise ideas and to see, in fact, what's the best and wisest way to live our lives. And this month, we have been dealing with the real testimonies of so many incredible individuals. And I'm so excited about what's to come as well. So next week, we will deal with part two of this conversation, this testimony, this real life situation, reality of Miss Sa-Vi-La Morgan and so many other people that she's mentoring and coaching and helping along the way. But then also there's so many others who are living in this reality every day and may not have a voice. Well, I hope that this conversation today, as you've heard it, will help lend yourself to realize that there's those who are walking around us every day who may be suffering silently. In part two of our conversation with Miss Sa-Vi-La Morgan, she's going to talk a little bit more about what to do when your prayers go unanswered. What does that do to your faith? How do you see God, and how do you embrace God when your prayers have not been answered? And she's going to talk a lot about how to give up control. Oh, that's going to be tough for some of us. Here's the other thing that we want to make sure that you understand. We want to beg you, please don't suffer silently. We want to invite you, please, if you need help, you need to sit down with someone, please make it a point to do that. We want to be here to help navigate that and be a bridge for you. And so if you need assistance with getting connected to a counselor, faith-based counselor, or a coach, or a mentor, then we want to be that bridge for you. And we are committed to that. Again, our goal is to provide tools and strategies for hearts to live inspired and heads to live wise. Thank you again for listening and for sharing us on social media. You can catch us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram. You can follow me also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn and Pinterest. All of that will be in your show notes below. I look forward to connecting with you all next week for part two of our conversation with Miss Sa-Vi-La Morgan, Childless but Not By Choice.